I often go for walks in a cemetery, and the older the cemetery, the better the walk. I go there because it's peaceful, and to me it seems full of life. I know that's probably the opposite of what most people think, but really, nature is allowed to be itself in an old boneyard, although lawns are always kept fairly decent. Still, it's a place of refuge for animals, such as squirrels and deer. Within these boundaries, they are safe. And so am I. I can take the mask off, the mask I would use if I were to go to a store or a museum or a church. In those places, I have to behave and be as I am expected to be. And that's not usually a problem because I'm used to that. We all are. But it sure is nice to just let the facade go for a while, isn't it? It starts with me talking to myself. And why not? There's no one there to listen. Well, no one alive anyway. And on the off chance that I actually do run into another person, because occasionally I do, if they hear me talking to myself, they usually keep away, which is just the way I like it. So at first, as I walk, everything is ordinary. But it doesn't take long for me to start wandering off the paths and going through the graves. That always stirs up a lot of emotion because I wonder about these people, If you're in an older cemetery, the graves can be quite descriptive. The people reached out over the centuries. They knew that some people like me, would be reading their grave inscriptions, and they wanted to give us all a message. So you'll read something like this: "In bloom of life she snatched from hence, she had not room to make defense, for tiger fierce took life away, and here she lies in a bed of clay." Or this gravestone of a 7-month-old baby: "Adieu, sweet babe, thy pains are over. We soon shall meet and part no more." Or how about this one? "Remember, man, as you go by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you shall be. Prepare yourself to follow me." Some people might find that a bit eerie, but you see, they knew that some of us would be looking and reading and thinking, and that's what they wanted us to do. My guess is those who are in these graves used to walk among graves themselves when they were alive, and they read even older tombstones that have probably disappeared altogether. We'll never know what inscriptions they were privy to, and I'll bet they were touched by those epitaphs that they read. So, as they approached their death, they knew that they wanted to say something to passers-by in the future too. Some of these graves I look at are old, over 200 years old. Could the people really have imagined someone like me walking by their graves and reading them? Somehow I think they could. Interestingly, though, you won't find many messages on modern graves. Just the birth date and death date, and maybe sometimes simple like beloved wife or cherished child. But here's something you will find with modern graves that you won't find with the older graves. Oddly enough, there seems to be a pecking order, even in death, and it really sickens me. You see, nowadays, the wealthy dead people are separated from the poor dead people in a modern cemetery. And if you don't believe me, go and look for yourself, you'll see. You'll see these large, stately graves with beautiful carvings, statues, and even mausoleums. The wealthy people can afford to give the message to others, even in death. Look how wealthy I am. Look what I can afford. Look what I have. Like it really matters when your bones are in the dirt. Believe it or not, though, it's true. Then, if you go to another part of the same cemetery, a part that's not nearly as well kept, you'll find the poor graves. Many of them are tiny, or altogether flat. They're just flat stones on the ground. You really have to go right up to them to see them. Often the grass is growing half over the older ones, so you have to dig a bit of it off if you want to see what the inscription says. And the stone is always so tiny that there's not much room for poetic reflection on it. I find myself frustrated with all of this. Even in death, people seem to have to separate the wealthy from the poor, the presumably better from the salt of the earth. The wealthy graves are allowed to have many flowers and wreaths placed on and around them, but there are strict rules for the poor graves. Cut flowers only in tiny, approved grave vases with prongs that fit into the ground, and only in some places. In other places, even that isn't allowed. And you better believe there are signs posted saying this. And if you disobey and place decorations in the poor section anyway, well, they will be removed. I actually saw this happen just a couple of months ago. A man named Charles died, and he was buried last July. He was 93 years old and had served in the Navy. But he was poor, and most likely his family was poor too. I didn't know him personally, but I happened to be walking in the cemetery when they were burying him. There was no stone over his grave for quite some time, so for a while I didn't even know his name. I used to bring nuts and seeds and put them on his grave so that the animals would come and visit him. And then one day, I saw some beautiful handmade decorations on his grave. Someone had a small flag made with his face on it, his name and dates of birth and death. It said, "The Best Father" on it. And that's how I found out his name was Charles. There were flowers in a couple of mason jars that someone had sunk into small holes that were dug around the grave. And there was a small solar light decoration as well. It was really nice. I smiled from ear to ear when I saw it, not only because I finally learned his name, but because I could feel just how much someone still loved him. Sadly, though, in a couple of days, the whole thing was torn down and removed. Even the mason jars were pulled up out of the ground, because it was against the rules, you see. Supposedly it makes it difficult for the landscapers to mow. But I know the real reason. The real reason was because Charles was poor and couldn't pay for the privilege of having a beautiful headstone. Well, in my book, he lived and died a far richer man than many of those people who advertised their family name on absolutely huge, garish stones. Not that there's anything wrong with having a beautiful grave and tombstone. There isn't. And I'm not saying that there is. It's perfectly fine. And if you can afford it, I say go for it. In fact, I hope I can have a nice big one someday too. It's just that other people who can't afford it should not be penalized. Anyway, after 4 months, a small official flat stone was finally placed on Charles's grave. So at least he has a marker now. I know that the grass will eventually creep over it as the years go by, and the earth will eventually swallow it up as it has billions of other graves. But just for now, it's grand to see it and to know that Charles is not forgotten. Someone loves him dearly still. My sister has a very sad and melancholic view of death that many people share. She says she doesn't care what happens after she dies, and that no one should waste a penny or a breath on a tombstone or even visiting her grave. She says that when you die, that's it. You're done. No more. You don't go on. It's over. There's nothing. You are obliterated. You don't matter anymore. And you know, there was a time in my life, it seems a lifetime ago now, but I shared that same idea. And I'm so glad now that I no longer do. I don't really know for sure what happens when we die, because no one has gone from this life and come back to tell me. But I do know that life is so intricate and elaborate and precious and beautiful. And if we were all here randomly and purely by accident, for no reason whatsoever, well, that just doesn't make any sense, does it? Life is so complex and amazing. And you want to tell me it's all here purely by accident? Really? I don't think so. I don't believe that for 1 second. You see, I have been given a gift by visiting these old graveyards. When I walk through them and I read the many inscriptions, I'm filled with thought and emotion about these people. I cry when I see the baby graves. I can't help it. Those are so hard to look at. I can actually feel the torment of the mothers who lost their children, because I'm a mother myself. And I find myself thinking fondly of the life these people must have lived in pre-automobile days, when traveling was done by horse and buggy, when there were no phones and no internet and no TV. I wonder about their close, tight-knit communities, what they must have been like. And I have to admit that I even feel a bit of jealousy over that. I also wonder, I really wonder, if sometimes the people in those days felt as trapped as most of us do now in today's world. Anyway, I don't think I could have had such a change in thought and opinion if these people were just done, no more, obliterated, just blips on a screen, as my sister says. No, they have caused too much thought and introspection in my mind. They have caused me to wonder about society and politics and the world and religion and the people around me and our animated carbon shells that carry our immortal souls. I don't know where they are or what their existence is now, but I do know that they're there, somewhere, somehow. When my daughter was very little, about 5 years old, I brought her to a very old cemetery that had Revolutionary War heroes in it. There was a small grave in the shape of a stone cross, and all it said on it was Mother. That's it. There was no name, no dates, no epitaph, just the word Mother. And it was very old. I pointed it out to her and I told her what it said. And do you know what she did? Well, I'll never forget it for as long as I live. She walked up to it, knelt down, and hugged it with a huge smile on her face. Because, you see, to her, the word mother meant love. And it still does. There was nothing for her to fear. She didn't really understand too much about life and death, although she had lost a beloved pet by that point. But she was not afraid. She did not feel awkward. She certainly didn't worry about what other people might think of her hugging a grave. Oh, to be a child again, and to just love for no reason at all. So, I walk through these old cemeteries. I talk to the residents, sometimes fairly loudly. Sometimes I sing old ballads and songs to ancient deities. No one knows I do it, and no one cares. Well, no one living knows anyway. I will leave you with this today. In 1934, Claire Harner of Topeka, Kansas, wrote a bereavement poem called Immortality, and it goes like this. Do not stand by my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am the thousand winds that blow. I am the diamond glints in snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. As you awake with morning's hush, I am the swift upflinging rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the day transcending night. Do not stand by my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.